welcome to the first panel. We're sorry we're a little bit late with starting the panel, but we're going to get right into it. So we imagine the program of the afternoon as panels with the artists in the exhibition, trying to make constellations of interest, in some cases, you know, with practices that are working on similar topics or using analogous methods, or you know, working quite differently, but in ways that we thought would be interesting to be brought into a conversation. So I would just like to introduce by name the artists, the participants on the panel. They are all artists in the exhibition. They all do other incredible things alongside their practice, but you have the chance to read more about them on the website. But for now, Chitra, Ganesh, Nicoleta, Moise, Dumitrescu, și Ștefan, Sava. Sorry for misgendering. Yes, so we will start with some questions for each of the artists. I think it's first and foremost important to hear from their own perspective about the works in the exhibition, but we will also try to then engage in a collective discussion. So I would like to start with Chitra, to ask her to speak about the process of working on this production for the exhibition. And I'm particularly grateful that you know, she realized it in only a few months. So an incredible work on its own, but particularly knowing that it came through this very concentrated research. And then, yes, would be great to take the conversation further. But maybe, Chitra, you can speak maybe a little bit with your encounter with Maitreyi Devi, her writing and her context and her, you know, achievement, accomplishment.
Hello? There. Is that working now? No. Okay. Hi. Oh, okay. Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's an honor to be part of this exhibition with so many amazing artists whose work I learned more about just now and have had to see. So my works are, they are like flags hanging in the corner of the larger space over there, and the work is based on this book, which I'm going to leave here, but in my conversations with Cosmin, I had not heard of Mircea Eliade, and so this was my first understanding of him, and so I was quite surprised to learn that many of you had read Maitreyi as part of your school curriculum. Yeah, it was a compulsory reading about this, you know, in part about this love affair between Eliade when he was 23 and Maitreyi Devi when she was 16. So I am not familiar with Bengali literature, but in speaking with my cousin, who is actually a professor of women's literature in India, Maitreyi Devi is also a very renowned writer and poet, and so part of what was so interesting about this book, well, both of the books are actually beautifully written, though I will say I was disturbed by some of the descriptions in the Eliade book, just in the beginning, where he talks about this kind of attraction and repulsion, which is how the story starts. But I think that both of the narratives talk about this really intense connection, his perhaps through a more orientalizing gaze, but she also discusses their relationship not as a victim or someone who was tricked into being with him, but as a middle-aged woman reflecting on her own adolescent coming of age and desire in a very open and authentic way, and also in a way that was critical both of the colonial dynamic as well as the local patriarchy, both of which sort of shaped her experience. So so basically she got married. She was married off when she was 20, and she had a whole other life. She wrote many books, and my work there draws a lot from her text, and in some cases there is overlapping visual imagery in both of the Eliade and Maitreyi Devi books, including imagery of the night, imagery of the balcony and the veranda. So I took some of those themes, but her work is it goes in and out between poetry and memoir, and it's very, very visually striking and at times almost hallucinatory. So those were some of the qualities that I was interested in exploring in my work.
I mean, what I find quite amazing about Maitreyi Devi's book, I mean, many things about it, and of course, like the writing itself, but it's particularly like what you mentioned, that it's, I mean, on one hand, it's for obvious reasons not so often that we have like a strong voice speaking back to the colonizer's pen or the colonizer's camera, the colonizer's gaze in general. So this in itself is quite remarkable. But then indeed, as you mentioned, it's also remarkable, you know, her own position, that indeed, you know, she's not, you know, a victim that didn't have any relationship back to that camera or to that pen in the original place, you know, so that she loved him, and I find that crucial, and not for the sake of humanizing him, but for the sake of empowering her, you know, that there was that, you know, gaze from her own side as well, in the first place, always there. So
yeah, and when the book was published, her book was published in the mid-70s. It won a national award in India, and hundreds of people would come to hear her read the book, I think in part because it was very forward-thinking about this way of looking at the system, the systems of gender and the systems of empire that had a major role in their intimate love.
there is also this interesting aspect to it. We talked a little bit about it, that she was invited to Romania in 1963 by the Union of Writers at the time. And in 1963, like Mircea Eliade was still banned. I mean, it was before his partial rehabilitation.
Yeah.
So, and I find also this like as an interesting situation, like to go to the country of this figure while he was actually not allowed to be in the country at that moment. So it's also an interesting reversal of power. But
one last thing is, so she confronted him after she found out about the book, and she made him promise that he wouldn't publish an English translation of this book until her death. So in 1974, both versions were in 1994, both versions were published together. So.
But I wanted just a last question, because I mean, of course, in the context of the exhibition, this is a, I think it's extremely interesting to have this conversation in the Romanian context of like how, you know, this particular document of a particular intellectual that was crucial in building several moments of national identity. I mean, he was, you know, part of, you know, a generation that tried to craft, you know, at a certain moment, a fascist version of Romanian culture. Then from the 90s onwards, without necessarily those extreme aspects of his work, he was certainly used very much to build a contemporary Romanian culture that draws a lot from those decades between the two world wars that was seen as somehow a golden era for Romania. But I wanted to, you know, keeping this game of comparison, to ask a little bit about the Indian context, of which you're, of course, very familiar with, and particularly of how the current far-right regime in India is also employing literature, religion, a certain idea, a narrow idea of culture and of elite historical culture to build its own political agenda.
Yeah, I think it's this exhibition and this project, for both of those reasons, feel very timely for me, because there is a very striking and disturbing, like, ethno-nationalist impulse happening right now in India and among the regime. I mean, one example, for example, is the rehabilitation of Nathuram Godse, who was the person who assassinated Gandhi. And so this idea that he was a Hindu nationalist and he believed that there wasn't enough of a voice or power being given to what a lot of, what that far-right thinking claims is the Hindu origins of India, which we all know it's been syncretic for millennia. So that's one example of that, but definitely figures in mythology, in religion, and in history are being reconstructed to serve this regime's agenda, while other writings are being censored and banned, including the writing of a lot of contemporary journalists.
Thank you, Chitra. So, Nicoleta, I wanted to ask you about your work, and particularly, I think your work, I think we borrowed a lot of the methods of work in your exhibition, in our exhibition from your work. I think there are these sort of like similarities of going, following threads of association, of research, unexpected pathways that open up, and you know, you create this incredibly rich, playful and dancing essay around history and art history and you know, different angles of politics. So tell us more about that.
Hello, thank you to everyone who is here. I'm Nicoleta Moise. I'm an artist and writer and part-time journalist, so it makes sense that the work has this very dense research, but also a little bit poetic, and like not to keep it very boring when you have so much like historical data, let's say, but I will let you judge this part. So I will briefly say what is it about, even though I don't think it's about something, but yeah, I will make a resume. So actually the movie started when I discovered that two girls, like 12 years old girls, they scratched the column of infinite, one of the most known, like on an international level, for public monuments, for monuments in public space. So they scratched this column of infinite. I found out about the incident. They vandalized basically the monument, and I went to Târgu Jiu, and it was actually the first time I saw also the monumental ensemble. For those who don't know, there are like three major works of Brâncuș: the Column of Infinite, the Gate of the Kiss, and the Table of Silence. Thank you. So yeah, I went there, I saw the three pieces, and I found out that there was a proto-feminist collective in 1920s who actually invited Constantin Brâncuș to do the ensemble for the soldiers who fell in the Second World War. So basically what was supposed to be, I mean, yeah, it was supposed to be like a public monument. It became like one of the most important pieces in the modern sculpture, right? Yeah. And yeah, basically the movie traces also my journey because it started in 2018 and it stops in 2020. So I went there back and forth for a few times. And yeah, the league, because that's very important to mention, the league who was founded by Aretia Tătărescu. She was the wife of the prime minister at that time, Gheorghe Tătărescu. He has a bit of a shady background, but yeah, this is for another time. So she was passionate about art and tapestry, like also like a sort of like Caritas figure. Like she was helping women who wanted to do, you know, like ceramic or tapestry and so on. So that's why she was connected to Constantin Brâncuș, actually. And I found out later on that in the 90s, there was a second league who wanted to follow the same path as Aretia, like to support mostly like women's, I would say, or like people in vulnerable positions. And but they had less resources than Aretia at that time. And the most beautiful part actually is that it starts from this very known sculpture, and it goes to a very particular story, which is that the league actually helped and they built a hairdresser salon for a girl who was a victim of human traffic in Italy when she was a minor. And this is for them the most important project they did along the time. So basically for me, the monument in this moment, like the monument of solidarity, is this hairdresser salon. And yeah, it's you should see it, and yeah, we can also discuss about this later. But my main focus was to shift a little bit the attention from Brâncuș to this collective of women who are like completely unknown. Like when I found out about it, I was like, why I never learned about this in school? And yeah, for some reason I found out that the movie is actually screened now in the University of Arts, in the art history department. When they talk about Brâncuș and the Column of Infinite, they also mention now this movie and the project, which is, for me, this is it. Like, if this is it, then I'm happy, and I did my part somehow. And yeah, then there is also like the neon with the symbol that these two girls scratch on the column, S plus S, best friends forever. So basically I wanted to shift also the attention to this symbol of friendship, and because it is about friendship in the end, it's not about Brâncuș anymore. And I think this is it, like the sum up. I didn't cover everything, but yeah. Cosmin, questions?
Well, yes, thank you. Just because there's actually like even more stories there that you like, also like the story of the Ecaterina Teodoroiu and her representation. So I also like wanted to ask you to bring that into the conversation, because it's yet another sort of like strand that is like less discussed. And I mean, Ecaterina Teodoroiu as a figure was in fact a name that was quite present in the communist era, in particular as again as a sort of like name that was everywhere on many streets and squares, like Nicolae Titulescu, but without anyone really knowing what she had done. Same with Nicolae, but you bring her in, and with also like another artist. So maybe you want to speak about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, she just showed up just like for a few seconds in the video essay, but she was the first female soldier. Yeah, and she's actually now on the 500 lei backnut? No, how do you say? Yeah, like the, yeah. And maybe more people know her now because of this, I don't know. Like the ones who can afford the, yeah, 500 lei, yeah. But yeah, she 20? 20 lei? Well, it's, yeah, okay, 20 lei, so pay attention. Yeah, she was the first female soldier, and she has in Târgu Jiu, in the same city where this monumental ensemble is. She has a mausoleum, yeah, that Milița Pătrașcu actually engraved, and she sculpted it basically. And also, very important information, she was supposed to be the one to build the ensemble, but somehow, yeah, I don't know exactly how they end up to Brâncuș, but it was like a small group of artists, and they knew each other. But I think Brâncuș already had some sketches with the column of infinite, and then, yeah, sorry, I shifted from Ekaterina again to Brâncuș.
I mean, I think that's, I mean, it's interesting because my question for you would have been precisely what you mentioned about the school and the fact that this is already like mentioned in school, because indeed it is about, you know, what do we speak about when we speak about art history, you know, like what, you know, how does the context that surround, that not just surrounds the objects, but gives meaning to the objects that you know, we regard as art are, how does that come into play? What does that help us learn further as we move further away from the object? And it's, you know, great to hear that this is actually happening, and this work and this sort of like, you know, context is being brought into the educational context.
Yeah, and one last thing, I think it's, I mean, this is how I found out that I like to do things, like when I want to talk about like history or like facts, I involve myself into the scene, into the camera. So I think it's much more easy, even for me, when I see other works, to see the person who did, to have the image of the artist or whoever is doing the work. And I think that's why it's easy also to follow the story, to be honest, because you have this personal, sometimes poetic inserts. Yeah, this is how I work, actually, yeah. But, yeah. Thank you.
Ștefan, I think I would like you to introduce a little bit like the second work that we had less time to speak about, a particular work around Leo Frobenius first.
Yeah, thank you so much for the wonderful context for the exhibition, and I mean the work here was amazing. So I have 3 works in the show. They kind of draw an arch between 2 different periods of time, the beginning of my career, let's say, and nowadays. I mean, the second work was made especially for the show. So it's made of 10 wax cylinders that we can see here in the space, and it was after they gave me a challenge, the theoretical challenge regarding this a historical episode, which is quite strange, I think, in recent history, Romanian recent history. So during the First World War, there were some working camps with prisoners of war brought from Germany, but the prisoners actually were of color, so from India and Africa. So in that time, Romania was under German occupation, the south of the country, and especially Bucharest. And so for many reasons, especially practical reasons, they decided to move them here in the south of the country, near Slobozia. I was born in Slobozia, so it made a lot of sense for me to deal with the episode as well. But so for 1 year, they were kept there, and they were doing different kind of activities, mainly different kind of works. But so Leo Frobenius, this kind of very famous at that time anthropologist and ethnograph. Actually, he actually came to Slobozia to manage the whole situation with the prisoners of war. So he was a promoter of the rights of different cultures from Africa, for example. He organized before the war a lot of expeditions there, and he studied the civilization and the artifacts and the traditions of African people. And also he was promoting the rights of the African people, but he was a controversial figure in the same time. He was also a spy. He wrote some important books about the morphology of culture, and he was also an amateur archaeologist and photographer. And at some point he decided to use the labor of the prisoners of war to dig some archaeological sites in the south of the country. And so after so he went there with the prisoners, and then he uncovered some artifacts coming from the Neolithic time. And he decided to sell the artifacts to the Museum of Berlin. The artifacts were lost. At the end, the museum was bombed during the World War II. So a very dystopic, very unsettling, I think, episode in the Romanian history. I mean, we have like a German anthropologist coming from like a huge colony at that time, managing a situation regarding prisoners of war of color, and digging some local artifacts from Neolithic, and then selling them obviously to the museums. So for me, this tension, lately I'm focusing more on the idea of artifacts or maybe producing this kind of new artifacts which are in between time and histories and tensions and different narratives. And so I decided to immerse some ceramic fragments coming from that time. I mean, I reproduced them somehow into the wax cylinders, which remind of the first technique of recording sound, which was Thomas Edison, I think in 1877. He invented the phonograph, and later the phonograph was used by anthropologists in studying different kind of cultures. But that's kind of a bizarre episode, I think, and the challenge was for me to express these different kind of tensions into an object. But then going back to the first works in the show, that's a different story. I mean, the photos in the first room, the 34 photos that I took in 2009, and then the video near them, they address a different kind of topic. At that time, I was very interested in the topic of the Holocaust in Romania. Even before becoming an artist, somehow intrigued me a lot the fact that Romania was so involved in the Holocaust. I mean, and actually I had to go to Berlin to find out that Romania was on the third place in terms of the number of the Jews who were killed during that time. So nobody was actually speaking loudly about the Romanian involvement in the Holocaust. So I was very young. I learned about the concept of post-memory, which for me it was very important to understand why I was so interested in the topic. And somehow I decided that I realized that art might be the right context for me to address some questions regarding our local history. So that's how I decided to travel around the country for 1 month. At that time I was doing photography. I'm very grateful to the curators because they decided to include the series in the exhibition, but actually I never showed the photos. After I took the photos, the archive is much larger, but after I took the photos, I realized that photography is so limited. It's still beautiful, but very unsettling, very disturbing, I think. And also what you said in the tour, Cosmin, it's very true. I mean, at the time, it was a different context when I did the works. Now, again, it's a different context. There's the genocide going on in Palestine and also the anti-Semitic actions which are getting, which grow in nowadays times. So I think I think it's very complicated to speak about history, and we have a huge responsibility to go back and to look again what's going on nowadays globally speaking, in our times. Questions?
Yes, well, this was very much my question as well. Yes, there is this difficulty, of course, and well, difficulty, not difficulty as such. I mean, of course, the context change, and there's a responsibility to be aware of that and to be aware of like what one says and when and to whom and how. I mean, specifically about the genocide both of Jews and of Roma. How do you feel, nevertheless, that the conversation has shifted over the last decade and a half? Again, in the Romanian context, and again, mindful of, you know, the international context, but particularly now looking at how that history has been recorded, and I mean, also looking at specifically Roma activism and the different actions in the political, activist, and cultural scenes. How do you think that has been shaped?
During my research, I forgot to say that at the end I finished a PhD about the topic of post-memory Holocaust in Romania. So seven years of work, not necessarily only with the Holocaust in Romania, but with the idea of historical traumas and post-memory. So let's not forget that the final report regarding the Holocaust in Romania was published at the beginning of 2000s, probably under the pressure of European Union. So at that time, people were still in denial regarding the involvement of the Romanian side. And for me, when I got deeper into the research, I understood much better what was going on, because so we had the war. After the war, the communists came, which, I mean, falsificated history a lot. Not even the word Holocaust was not written in the history books. And then, for example, they were saying that during the pogroms, they were not mentioning the Jews were killed, but the Romanians were killed. And then different kind of stories that, for example, Jews started to rebel, and that's why the Iași pogrom somehow took place. So 40 years of brainwashing, really complicated for people to understand what really happened. And then the 19th came, right? And we saw the rehabilitation of Marshal Ion Antonescu as well. And the far right was again growing. For me, it was somehow an absence subject when I traveled around the country. Artistically speaking, it was not, I mean, it was absent as well. So in terms of Holocaust, there's a huge tradition regarding the representation of the subject, but here in Romania, there was nothing at that time. For the last 15 years, things changed a little bit. I mean, publicly, I think people are more aware of what happened, but still, it seems to be a subject that they don't want to open. They just keep it somewhere in the back of their mind. So I think it's typical for Eastern Europe, and maybe it's too recent to have a proper discussion about our own history. But hopefully things will change some.
Thank you, Ion. Last but not least, your contribution is well somewhat threefold. There is the work in the in the show as well, about which I would also like to speak, to invite you to speak more about. I mean, also because, you know, there's a lot of history there that is maybe not so obvious as in the case of Chitra, Nicoleta, or Ștefan, you know, this sort of like pathway from Dimitrie Cantemir to Dan Armeanca. But you know, it also includes, well, the concert last night, the great concert and set last night, but also the text that you wrote. So I would like you to walk us through these different musical pathways.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So yes, where should I start? Yeah, I mean, Dimitrie Cantemir, I don't know, I think everybody knows, maybe Dimitrie Cantemir, so I shouldn't present him.
I think in some ways it's also a name that, you know, everybody knows from street signs and addresses, but maybe not, well, the particular significance that we discussed about and was also like behind the work. So I think it's important to, I think in all these cases, I think, you know, everybody knows Mircea Eliade and Maitre, and everybody knows Constantin Brâncuș, but not actually the context that they were part of. So I think that's also the case with Dimitrie Cantemir in many ways.
So the whole, so my drive in this project has been developing for some years. My interest in lăutărie, lăutărism, and Balkanic contemporary wedding music, it's been in the process for the past 10 years, maybe more. So the first drive for me was to somehow present the futuristic features of contemporary wedding music, of lăutărie. Lăutărismul and wedding music was constantly put down or disregarded or ignored by the intellectual elites, by the Romanian cultural project, as having no value to the real Romania. So this was always marginalized and never considered or integrated in any critical history, and never seen, I mean, always missing the features that makes it actually, that makes lăutărie and lăutari, and especially neo-lăutari after '89, more in tune with the future or progressive future than the local academia. So for me, that's what the name is, Balkanibalism. It started, and it's here I make this little connection with Manifesto Antropofago of Oswald Andrade from Brazil, who was exactly in the turmoil of the 20s when also the Brazilian identity had to be defined. So Oswald Andrade wrote this Manifesto Antropofago. What if our to be or not to be? What if our mission is to cannibalize everyone and every culture, not to define, not through defining and holding and making a monolith of identity? So I think in a way, contemporary wedding music and lăutari are sort of agents of cannibalism, working and using the inter-Balkanic roots that go trans-border. And in this sense, they are always modular, always culturophagic, always taking from Serbia, from Albania, inventing new system, adapting. So it's like a modular station. Balkans are like a modular station where you can always adapt to, and now lately to reggaeton, to any kind of global. So Manele and Manaua is very open. It's like a modular thing. It's very open. And in this sense, I was going back to Dimitrie Cantemir, which was disregarded by Constantin Noica in his famous or infamous book on lăutărism, and he takes Dimitrie Cantemir, our 18th century Enlightenment intellectual, who was navigating from the Ottoman Empire to the Russian Empire and to the West. So he was navigating between worlds, between colonial empires, without putting the West in a center, or without making like this kind of Euro-Western centric. So he would say that actually Turkish music is much more interesting than Western music. So he would write the notation system. And actually, he rewrote the notation system of Turkish music. But he's a musician, philosopher, writer, narrator, proto-anthropologist. He wrote the first description of Moldavia, so the first, and in a way, so that's why I'm trying to make, so I try to make, being a bit short, trying to shorten up here, from Dimitrie Cantemir, who started this kind of pan-Balkanism and maybe universal, so he had this attitude of, I call it the trans-border attitude, non-centrical, not placing any center specifically, using everything on the same plane. So for me, neo-Lautarism, somehow I call them the Dimitrie Cantemir's trans-border agents. So the Lautar, they carried, in contrary with the local projects, who try to, try to define the culture, contemporary wedding music, they kind of open. They're becoming portals to Turkish music, and recently from Dan Armanca to Iraqi pop disco, to Syrian, so, like really broadening up. So, in this sense, I feel that the contribution of wedding music, and especially after 89, late 80s, early 90s, it has been very much ignored, to the loss of us, to the loss of the Romanian cultural project. It was only plus, was only opening to really places we have ignored. Like, many people know much more about the Western histories, Western cultural, than the Balkan culture. So people don't know the artists of the Balkans. I mean, in Romania, I'm always very, shocked to see how the ignorance of ours in the Balkans. So we don't know how to navigate in the Balkans. It's like we don't own the Balkans in the body. So like this rigidity in the intellectuals have refused us of so many interesting and eyes opening and cultural opening and getting into the groove. So like the rigidity. So this is how I connect a bit with the video. I feel like the groove, the dance, it's like it's a transgression needed. So like this rigidity of the intellectual project was never stiff. So you cannot mix aspiration, intellectual aspiration, with dance, with being in the groove. So it's like, this kind of my homage is like, yeah, man, intellectuals should get into the groove.
Yeah, thank you for that. No, I think that's really like a very nice sort of like goodbye that you get when you leave the large room, and particularly like all the conversations there, and there is this lightness that is not, escapist or disrespectful towards, the victims of the many crimes discussed there, but there is a great potential and promise and liberatory feeling in that groove that you mentioned. I think it would be great to sort of like bring in the conversation another artist in the show who was not possible to travel here, Claudia Ndujar. I mean, in relation to both the conversations about the context that we discussed after Ștefan's presentation, and how history is constantly being renegotiated with sort of like, I mean, what is a context? The context is what is around the text, what surrounds a place, and everything, one decides where to draw the lines around the text, and how wide they are, and how irregular the shape is, and how much does it have tentacles and antennas that extend to draw that border of the context. With this exhibition, we try to bring the conversation about places where nothing happened, like in your work, and like in the work of Apishapong Virastakun next to it, like in the work of Ultima Esperanza, that also shows the grounds where the Shelknam genocide took place. So there are basically like these three works that show landscapes of crime scenes, essentially. But then there's the works of Claudian Dujar, an artist who grew up in Romania, whose father was murdered at Dachau, and who managed to leave to Brazil, to escape to Brazil, and where she engaged with the Yanomami community, and who drew herself her own connection between the genocide of her people, of Jews in Europe, with the genocide that was happening ongoing at different levels of intensity of indigenous people. This is also like a kind of a comparison of genocides that is increasingly becoming controversial these days to be made, but she made it. And these photographs in the exhibition that show people with numbers, which is this sort of like uncanny resemblance with other genocides, both with the Holocaust, where people were marked on the skin, but even more strikingly, actually, like with the genocide in Cambodia in the 1970s, which before people were murdered, they were actually photographs with a number, often actually pinned in their skin. I mean, in this case, this was a campaign of vaccination, so it was actually like an attempt to save people from, the genocide of the encounter with forces of modernity. But yes, okay, I would like to ask all of you, because you mentioned that you were a journalist, and you gave this explanation that the incredible richness of your work is rooted from this profession. But I wanted to ask you all, how do you see, because you all deal with history in different ways, and with the present as well, and with a sense of responsibility towards the present. So how do you see your role as artists in doing that? Like, what is history and contemporaneity for you? How does the object, the forms, the imagery that you make and that you craft, what role does it play in that sense of your mission as artists? Maybe we start in the same order with Chitra, Nicoleta, and yes.
For me, for my work, but also I see this in the show in many ways. I think there's a really interesting investigation of non-linear time, of temporality that doesn't go in a straight line or doesn't favor a certain notion of progress, but time that kind of circles back on itself, and thinking about how the past and the present are coextensive, and inhabiting the same landscape, both physically and also psychically. So I think that that's important for my work.
I already forgot the question, but no, I'm kidding. Yeah, no. Yeah, somehow I was thinking that even when I don't try, but it seems that even if I feel it's more like of a, could be a work like more poetic, somehow it goes back to, like, I have no choice than to trace back history. Like, it's impossible not to mention what happened. I mean, I refer to exactly this work behind me, the League of Gorge Women. And yeah, like, I think it's a whole process. Like, when I embark in such a project like this one, like very long term, I learn a lot, like from like history books or whatever, literature and so on. So I keep myself informed as on the way, actually, and it's quite beautiful, because even it's not the, let's say, main point when I start doing starting the project. But I don't know if it answers. Yeah, well, yeah. That's.
I think also like a lot of collective exploration of non-official registers of language, anecdotal, poetic, etc., that is nice to be in conversation.
Yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, the whole idea of learning and unlearning histories, I think, is crucial. And also, at some point, we might believe that the critical gesture might be enough for the others to maybe raise the same questions as we do. And I'm pretty sure that art can create this kind of mental space of knowledge regarding history as well, but you can't really quantify that. I mean, I mean, also, even if we deal with important historical aspects, everything is very subjective. The time is passing, things are going on. I mean, I'm a little bit. I mean, I don't see necessarily hope in that, but I think it's necessary for people to see art as a tool of understanding their own place in time.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe just something specific, what I like and I feel at home in this exhibition is that it undermines narratives and macro narratives, but also molecular narratives. So in this today world, everybody wants to put you in a narrative, like using narrative as a political tool. And this is like hard to frame. Suddenly you're like, you don't know where you are. And I think this is a very good place to be for an exhibition or for even a political project, like where, in the unknown, a bit of the unknown, but challenged effectively, challenged. So this is one of the things I like.
Maybe it's time to open the panel to the floor, since we're a little bit short with time. Are there any questions or comments or interventions by anyone, any of the other artists or guests or friends or new friends? Well, it's still early somewhat, but if there are no questions for now, I think we can anyhow continue the conversation also like privately and in the sort of like the hours ahead. I think we're going to take a 5 minutes break to set up the technical devices for the virtual reality with Tony Shakar. So see you back in 5 minutes, please.